Okay, so with that, record on. I'm going to call our December 20th, 2022 Board of Supervisors work session to order, our last work session of the year. So welcome everybody. For the record, we have Supervisors Doug Rushton and Helen Wheatley, myself, TJ Johnson, the chair, Executive Director Sarah Moorhead, and Ben Cushman, our legal counsel. First item up here is to take a look at our topic list. Are there any changes to what's in front of us here, either from board or staff?
No changes.
Right, no changes. We'll go with what we have then. So next up then is the minutes and from our last meeting, November 15th, board work session and meeting minutes. We've all had a chance to look at these already, but we'll go through them as we always do here. So first up here is the notes from the work session. Any comments on that page?
Well, I'm going to abstain from the minutes since I wasn't there.
Okay. Well, we won't take the vote until we'll put this on consent, presumably, and we'll vote on it at the meeting. So, Helen, you'll need to pull it off of consent if you want to abstain.
Not important.
Yeah. Well, I don't like voting on things that I wasn't at either, so it's not a big deal to pull it and just handle it separately. But at any rate, I'm hearing no comments on the work session here. So how about the minutes themselves? Anything here, first page of the minutes from the meeting? Oh, how about the second page? Nothing on the second page. Page 3. Nothing on page 3. How about the final page? Anything on the last page? All right, hearing none, we'll leave them as is. We'll put them on consent for our meeting here at 6:30. Then move on to the next item here, which is the Conservation Education Center update. Sarah.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm going to invite Betsy at any point to, let's see, she's not here quite yet, but if she does join us during this, to jump in at any point. The Conservation Education Center subcommittee met last Wednesday to review the latest RFQ open period. We did not receive any responses to our RFQ. And here comes Betsy. So the committee met to do two things. One, to do a review and revision of the ranking criteria. For that, make sure that the ranking criteria really weights appropriately the skills that we're looking to get from our new future consultant. That's a process that, now that we have maybe some more time, is still underway, and one that will be really good to help sort of safeguard us against any future challenges. The second thing is, because we did not receive any responses to the RFQ, we talked about what can we learn from this and how do we proceed. We are looking to re-advertise the RFQ and beforehand go back to the folks that have provided a response requested the RFQ and ask them for some feedback on this process. Ben, that's something that we wanted to connect with you about as well. We did have 10 different requests for the RFQ. So when we put out an RFQ announcement, it says if you're interested in this project, it's a really short, snappy introduction to it. If you're interested in this, please request the full RFQ from, and it gives a contact name and information for the district. And so we did have 10 different individuals request that information, and none of them actually submitted a proposal. So the subcommittee talked about a couple of factors that could have contributed to that. One, we would love to go back and ask the folks that did request the RFQ, why didn't you submit your response? Are there any areas of concern? Was the RFQ unclear? Was there any, or were there any challenges with completing that scope of work that you observed? And just to, see if there were any challenges on our end in generating that scope of work. The second thing is, we anticipated that the Thanksgiving holiday probably played a part in that. So we did advertise it for a 4-week period of time, which is really customary. And that did span the Thanksgiving holiday. So that might have put additional pressure and challenge on meeting that deadline. So what we would like to do is right now through the end of this month, reach back out to those 10 requesters to ask for their feedback, to re-release the RFQ in early January for another 4-week time period so that we don't span the Christmas holiday. And we're sort of in the new year when folks are sort of looking back at work. And then we will finish sort of updating our ranking criteria information. And we will have another meeting of the subcommittee in early February to review any applications and do any ranking. That's sort of our proposed timeline that we wanted to bring to the board for any sort of questions, comments, or feedback on. And then the subcommittee also has a request. Betsy will be out of town most of the month of February. And so we would love to invite another board member to be involved in the process. Staff has found it really valuable to have 2 supervisors on the subcommittee. And if another supervisor is available to do the ranking, that would be great. So any comments, questions on the proposal piece?
Before we do that, I'll just ask Betsy, as a member of the committee, do you have anything to add to what Sarah was just saying?
No, I think she summed it up pretty well. It was sad or whatever. It was disappointing to not get any responses, but nope.
So Helen, Doug, thoughts, comments, questions?
Sarah addressed the one that I had, like, why do you think we didn't get any responses? I think I was addressed very well. I would be interested in the substitute committee member, what the time frame is you're thinking of and how much time it would take. That would impact, I think, who and how much of a commitment there would be.
Yeah, we're hoping just to have someone sort of sub in for Betsy just for this ranking committee, not necessarily ranking committee meeting, not necessarily replace Betsy. So for that, I would say probably maybe 2 hours worth of application review, and then we'll probably have about an hour meeting. So I would say 3 hours, 3 to 4 hours to be generous, probably during the same week. In the beginning of February would be kind of what we're looking for. We would be looking to wrap this up prior to the NACD annual meeting. Just for timing.
Yeah.
I guess I'm wondering, I'm just trying to problem solve, I guess, but is there any way to figure out the market? We had talked about this before, that the problem with this project is it's too small in a way, and I'm wondering, like, for example, TJ, when you looked at that project in was it in Eastern Washington somewhere? You kind of
Spokane.
Yeah, Spokane. Is it worth reaching out to them or others who have done or are in the process of doing a similar kind of project and seeing where they cast their net, I guess? Would that be productive?
We certainly can include those arenas in addition to what we have kind of outlined in our policy about how we submit this cast our net out there, because we can always include more. So I think that's a great idea. We can connect with those CDs that have done this work. to me, 10 respondents asking for copies of the RFQ is a good amount of interest. The fact that they didn't complete the RFQ, though, is curious to me. I don't know if there's something wrong with the scope of work in the RFQ itself, or if it was just the timing question, or if it's another reason entirely. But yeah, the size and sort of scale of work I feel like is pretty well presented in that initial statement. So we're happy to do that. I mean, any other individuals we can send this to would be great. I think we'll also learn a lot in that process of sort of reaching back out to those folks and saying, so, you know, why didn't you submit for this? And would you be likely to in the future when this is reopened? We'll help inform that.
Another factor is Sarah's very aware of Tom Salzer having the Clackamas in Oregon City building built. She's familiar with Spokane. Underwood is doing one. I gave her information from Teos, New Mexico, which may or may not be relevant. And I think Skagit is also looking at a building. So there are other examples.
Yeah, I mean, I think my guess, just, you know, of course I could be wrong, but my guess is it was probably just competing year-end priorities that people get busy with other projects and wrapping up contracts at the end of the year. So I think you've outlined a pretty good process. Yeah, it would have been good to get some proposals, but I don't think it's catastrophic. I think you've got a good process identified to learn from this and then to move us forward. So I'm comfortable with what you've outlined. That said, it sounds like you're looking for one of the three of us to join temporarily. And Doug, since you raised the question, were you interested in doing that?
No, I mean, I am, but that's right. Before the NACD meeting, I'll be doing all kinds of prep work.
How about you, Helen?
Well, I feel like it's totally outside my skill set. I don't think I'd be very helpful, honestly.
Okay, fair enough. Well, that leaves one person here then.
Thank you.
And I could do that. I have read a lot of RFQs in the past and done these sort of ranking things. So I'm happy to jump in there on a temporary basis until we can get Betsy back in the chair for the ongoing committee.
That's why I asked how long it would take.
Well, and Helen, just so you know, I don't feel like I'm know that much about what we're talking about either. I partly did it to maybe learn more about how the process works, but I listen more than anything. And I think when it comes to the ranking, that's where anyone will be more useful.
Okay, does that cause you to reconsider, Helen?
No.
Okay, fair enough.
Good try. Good
All
try.
right.
Although, I mean, so Betsy, if you're sort of saying that the more the merrier, you know, I could kind of look at it that way, and you know, you could keep me in the loop and I could perhaps participate anyway. But yeah, I really think TJ, you'd be better at it than I would.
Yeah, I think the problem with having three people on the committee is we run into the issue of quorum in public meetings, and this is probably something we don't want to do in a public setting. So,
Right.
okay, well then, yes, I'll jump in there for 3 or 4 hours, do what needs to be done. And is there anything further on this topic then, Sarah?
No, not unless anybody has any other comments, questions, or feedback, which I appreciate that suggestion, Helen.
Right, then let's then move on. We've got a good process identified there. So let's look at the next item here, which is a final look at our budget for 2023 before we adopt it later in our board meeting.
Give me one quick second as I pull that up. Comes in a variety of different attachments, as you saw. I'll just start here with sort of the consolidated proposed consolidated budget. And then if the board has any other thoughts, comments, or questions, we can go there. The budget is really similar to what was presented and discussed at the November meeting. And it's just reflective of the feedback that we heard from the board either at that meeting or shortly after that meeting. Let me resume share so you can actually see what I am sharing you. And so there have been some small changes, but not major changes. So I would love to entertain if there's any specific areas of focus that the board would like to talk about, or if the board has any sort of questions or comments on the budget as a whole, or the minor changes that were made.
Yes, because I made one of those changes in consultation with you around the Jedi stuff. So can you talk a little bit about that? And because that's a change from the last time we saw the budget.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did make a change, and I will pull up the other budget document, our unrestricted budget, because that's where you'll see the change reflected. So you should see 2023 unrestricted budget at the top of your screen.
Yep.
The change that we made here within our program allocations section, we did have a line item in this part of the budget specifically for Jedi work. It's a carryover from last year. You can see that reflected here in this negative $10,000. We removed that from a specific line item for a couple of reasons. It was just a line item that was labeled Jedi. It was kind of a placeholder item. In the event that we might use it for some sort of professional services contracting or other board defined use. To date, we didn't have any plan either on the staff side or hadn't received any direction on the board side for specific use for that line item. So again, it was carried over from our 2021 conversations. But what we did realize was we're already doing this work, but it's not funded from a separate line item, right? We've revamped our hiring practices, for example, but it's not something that we needed to pull additional resources from a separate line item to utilize. We also participate in a lot of Jedi-oriented trainings. We have a category specifically for staff to do those types of trainings. That's not this category. So we utilize a lot of Jedi practices throughout a lot of the implementation of our work, and we're continuing to sort of internally revamp and revise things. But right now it hasn't had a separate additional budget consideration. The downside of leaving that dollar amount in here was it could look negatively upon the district because we were doing so much work for equity and inclusion. But if we continue year to year to see an unspent line item of $10,000, there's going to be a perception that the district isn't doing anything to increase the inclusivity of our services and programs, when in fact, we're actually doing a lot of stuff to do that. So we're able to reflect that a lot in things like our annual reports and just a lot of our messaging and terminology. So that was a conversation that I had with TJ, which I fully agree that line item does not give the right message for the districts that we want to have. And at such point in time that there is a priority identified that does have a dollar amount associated, we can build that back into a future budget.
So basically the function was spread out amongst other programs.
Yeah, that 10,000 was really anticipating that perhaps we would need to do some sort of professional services contract.
I remember that discussion, yeah.
With a consultant, and we haven't realized that because WACD also, and David's participation in that committee with WACD has also generated a lot of other resources for all districts. And the training conversation that we had at WACD's annual meeting this year. So there's also resources coming down from other areas that we have access to. So that's also something that we're realizing that doesn't carry an expense to the district.
So Sarah, that $10,000 went away from that line. Where did it get reallocated to?
Yeah, that $10,000 was redistributed in our program allocations. One of the areas in here was some increase in Things like our plant sale and our elections, those are some pieces that realize some additional expense. And our soil health and equipment rental program. Those are a couple of the areas that, just looking at budget numbers in the coming year and increasing some of the support or some of the outreach, like, for example, Conservation Month is now one of the things that WSCC, the commission, is promoting. Some additional advertising requirements that we're gonna have and supporting that process. So we've included those things within this.
Thank you.
Good question.
Yeah, so that was the only question or thing that I necessarily wanted to point out, but other questions or issues that board member has with the proposed budget? Yeah, Helen.
Maybe you talked about this last month, but can you explain the plant sale budget? Why it looks like it's going down? Or am I reading that wrong? On line 9, I think it is. It goes, the 22 budget was 46.5, and then the 23 budget is 39.5. So
That's a projected income that we
yeah,
have.
I mean, considering how successful it was, you know, how it was kind of, it always is, there's always more demand than there is supply.
And I think that that's probably the issue, is
Ah.
literally the supply is really challenging. That's one of sort of the big issues that is a much broader issue that's gonna impact all conservation districts and restoration entities in the state of Washington and probably beyond, is there is a shortage of supply, nursery supply. So this is reflective of the supply that we were able to secure and the income that we know we can anticipate. It's likely that we'll be able to garner some additional brokered stock for the day of event for this plant sale, but it's not guaranteed at this point because everybody is competing for that, not just for our plant sales, but especially with this extra $10 million of salmon recovery funding that districts have gotten from the commission this year. We are tapping nurseries throughout the state for supply. So this is it's a conservative income estimate based on the stock that we know we should be guaranteed, if that makes sense. So we could realize something higher, or if there's crop failures and we don't get it, we could realize something lower, but this was something that we felt comfortable with.
And I'll just add to that, at the WACD annual meeting, there was a lot of discussion about this because all the districts are struggling to find sufficient materials for because everybody's doing more work and has more projects now, and as Sarah said, with the salmon enhancement money. So we're not the only district that are kind of in this boat scrambling to try to find supplies.
Yeah, and the Plant Material Center up in Bow I've asked the question, so is there things you could do differently there to have more capacity? And the basic answer is no, they're maxed out. Some of the districts, I'm thinking of North Yakima, they've started their own little nursery. So that might be something that we want to put on our parking lot to think about in the future, depending on where our new building is.
Yes, Spokane has done that as well with their new facility, Doug. They have a small nursery, or at least they did last year when I was over there. They were starting one.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity that is becoming increasingly popular with districts, and one that the Conservation Commission has been successful in getting some funding for to support districts in starting some sort of plant propagation venture. And certainly something that we should look into when we have the space to do that.
Or maybe if the demand is enough to look at Lawyer's old lot. It'll take over a
As a
former,
second.
yeah. Maybe rent some property or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
Something to think about.
I didn't,
well, as long as we're brainstorming, another idea might be to partner with the school districts.
possibly with the high school ag programs and so on. I didn't hear what Doug said, so I might be repeating it, but I think we should also just spread the word that it's an opportunity for any local, people looking to maybe open a new business or go in a different direction. But there's the need.
So, Helen, did your question get sufficiently addressed?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, more than sufficient.
Thank you.
Okay.
Partner with the other districts.
Okay, so other comments, questions on the budget?
Sarah, if you were a board member, is there anything in here that would give you pause? I didn't see anything that was untoward.
No, I think in general, we're doing really well, continuing to grow really rapidly, and we have a really thoroughly thought out plan for how, we can make that growth rate stable and achievable. So no, we put together a really good budget. This was a really great process and it felt really good moving through it. And I think we even finished a little early on some of these things, and yeah, I
Any,
think we have it dialed in.
any concern about a bow wave? Getting all this money right now and then 3 years out, 5 years out, it's not there.
Yeah, that is a concern. That's some of the things that we're hearing from the Office of Financial Management. For those that might not have heard Doug's question, Doug said, is there a concern about a bow wave? We're getting all of this money now. What about 3 to 5 years out? That is definitely a concern with some of the state money. OFM has mentioned that, what we're going to experience maybe in 4 years is, some tightening of available state funding for a variety of reasons. And so that's a time frame when there may be more budget cuts. So far, the governor's budget was released last week. It looks great for conservation districts. You probably saw that in my forwarded email. There is a lot of money. So what we're trying to do is look at this strategically and smartly, increase capacity to be able to actually utilize the money and build programs and services, but not do so in a way that we can't sustain that in a few years when and if we realize that there's a shortfall. What we've done to help start that is diversify our funding sources quite a bit at the district. Like realizing and achieving a lot more federal funding direct, which is helpful. Again, that's another budget that changes as well. But, so yes, that's something that we're definitely looking at. But I think the house that we're building, we're doing so really diligently. So there's no immediate concern, but
Good, thank you.
something to watch for.
Can you guys that aren't here in the office with Sarah and myself, can you hear me okay? It sounds like Betsy had trouble.
I can hear you, Doug.
Okay,
I can always use a little more volume, but that's me.
well, I can speak up a little more too, so we'll work together on this.
Thank you, Doug.
One other thing I wanted to point out is that this budget includes COLAs for our collective bargaining unit employees. And as I put in the email to the board members yesterday, it also includes both a COLA and a step increase for Sarah. And
Yes.
so just, we're still in the midst of the evaluation process. We'll be kind of starting to wrap that up tonight, but just so that you know that that's a piece of this too, that we're extending the same COLA to Sarah that we are going to extend to our represented employees.
If I can add just one piece to that, the COLA is budgeted for our staff across the board in the budget, which doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be realized that way. It's just budgeted. There's a step increase budgeted across the board for all of our staff, which again, doesn't necessarily mean it's always realized. I am not the only non-bargaining unit employee. We also have our district engineer who's not part of the bargaining unit. So I just wanted to make sure that was clarified.
Well, yep, thank you. Okay, anything else on the budget?
I would like to thank Sarah and Susan and Jan for putting this sucker together. I did the budget for water resources for a couple of years, and this is bloody awful stuff to have to deal with. So thank you.
Thank
But-
you. Susan and
but-
Yen have made this fun, which is,
I wouldn't go that far.
oh, you'd be surprised.
But it seems like it gets a little easier every year too. So, that's our process improvement there. Okay, so with that, then we will be putting this it is on our board meeting agenda for adoption here in a little while. And we've made no changes to it here, so we'll go with it as is, unless something comes up in the next little while. With that, we're item here, consent agenda items. Is there anything to talk about there?
There was a request, I believe, from the board about reviewing the December consent agenda items, just in case there were any questions, because there was quite a few different things on the consent agenda. So that's why that action item is, or that line item is there.
Okay, thank you. So we have all this stuff in our packet here. Are there any questions? And I'm looking particularly at items C through F, which are the funding items.
I don't have a question about that. So if no one else does, I have a different question.
About the consent?
Well, I didn't think I was that late to the meeting, but I didn't get to help review the board meeting minutes, and I just had a tiny thing that maybe got addressed.
We didn't make any changes to the meeting minutes, Betsy, but you can certainly offer a change and we can take care of that if you want to.
Well, I just wondered, how come early on, maybe somebody was late, but it wasn't noted. Why sometimes the vote was 3-0. It didn't say anyone abstained.
David was late to the meeting, and maybe that's not reflected in the minutes.
Okay. I wonder if it should be. For clarity? I don't know.
We can certainly put that up, add that under the list of attendees by David, just note arrived late.
Okay, I can make that change.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, and also Betsy, before you arrived, I think we agreed Helen's gonna pull the minutes off of the consent agenda when we get there, because she wasn't at the meeting and she wants to abstain. So when we get there, it'll be separate vote on the minutes.
Okay. Thank you.
With that, I think the next item up was the legislative issues. Get back to that.
I'm sorry. Yeah, potential legislation.
Yes.
I'll split this one with Doug. How does that sound?
Sure, you want me to go first?
Sure.
I think you probably know more than I do right now. Talking with commission staff, there's probably gonna be a Gregerson bill to reintroduce CD elections to be on the general ballot. So there's a lot of antipathy from the CD world to not do that for a variety of reasons. Also, the WACD Ledge Day is going to be February 8th. And we get leaned on heavily for legislative stuff because we're in Olympia. No big problem there. And commission staff suggested talking with Dolio, who's probably going to be the head of I forget which committee.
Energy and
also-
environment or something like that.
Yeah, and then Sam Hunt as well. So we'll see what happens. King has been supportive of going on the general ballot, and I think that's the only one. But that essentially causes a lot of problems for the Pend Oreilles, the Wahkiacums, the Columbias, some of the other districts.
Well, it would cause a financial problem for us. It would be exceptionally higher costs than we currently incur if we were on the general.
Yeah. Yeah, I pointed out in a previous legislative session, I think it was 2006, we were on a general ballot. And there were 44,000 votes plus or minus, and the cost was $44,000. At that time, that was an FTE. We could have put a lot of stuff on the ground with that money. I like the concept of going to the general ballot, but I think it needs to be thought out a little more and some sort of process that's clear and fair.
The state wants to do it, the state should be funding it. You know, I think they can't, otherwise it's an unfunded mandate.
In more recent years, the cost estimates that we've gotten have been definitely over $100,000, up to more than that if we do it on a not a federal election year, because we cost share with whomever else is on the ballot during that year, and so it was like over $100,000 up to like more than half of our rates and charges.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
one election, so it was a really significant lift for.
Yeah, my example was from, I think, 2006 or something, 2004, something like that. And the other factor is, you're all aware of the elections controversy stuff that's going on now with, fake elections and fake news and stolen election stuff. So there's going to be more scrutiny, I guess. Anyway, that's one thing that's coming up that I've heard about.
Sarah, do you have anything to add on legislation?
Not necessarily on legislation itself, just start thinking about the legislative day, and if you would like to participate in that, we're working on getting those appointments scheduled now with our legislators, so that we can make sure we get appointments with them. So if you'd like to participate in that, and there are particular legislators you'd like to see, please let us know. We try to schedule most of them on February 8th legislative day. Not always is that the case, so we could have them up to 2 weeks earlier and 2 weeks later usually, so it's sort of within that time frame. Again, what we're hearing is a lot of them are probably going to be over Zoom just because it's efficient. People are accustomed to that and it's a lot easier. Some of them still might be in person, and it will be really dependent on, of course, our preferences, but also the preferences of the legislator themselves. So we will wait to hear more about what that might be. So if you are interested in participating, that would be good for me to know. And if there are particular legislators that you'd like to meet with, that would be great too. I think anything else, I've just been following the state budget piece, and that's really what I've been looking at lately. So if there's any comments or questions, you can talk to me offline about that too. That's all that I've got.
And just as a heads up, the NACD conference starts on the 11th, and I need to leave a couple days before that, so my participation is in limbo. I mean, I want to, and I think it's important and intend to, but stuff comes up.
I wanted to throw one thing out here too. So there's an issue on the WACD legislative priorities list that I'm very uncomfortable with. And it has to do with overtime pay for agricultural workers. So, little piece of history here, when the National Labor Relations Act was passed in the 1930s, it exempted agricultural workers from minimum wage laws. And it was an inherently racist decision because most of those people were African Americans. And so, agricultural workers have worked for decades and decades and decades to try to get overtime pay. And a couple of years ago, they achieved that in Washington state. So we're now required to pay overtime for agricultural workers. WACD, on their legislative agenda, they are proposing that we get rid of that during harvest season. And I understand the argument, it costs the growers more because they have to pay people more. But it's the wrong, it's just wrong. It's morally wrong, and we're in the 21st century here. And so I would like to just be very clear with Sarah and in all of our legislative contacts that while that might be a WACD priority, we do not support that. We support fair wages and fair overtime pay for people that do some of the hardest work in the state. And, you know, this was not a fight I was going to bring up at WACD, and I probably wouldn't have won it if I did. But I think that the easy out here is, as a district, we just say, no, we're not going to overturn a law that took us so long to put in place that does good things for workers.
Yeah, when the WACD board discussed that, I had the same view, TJ, and the counter argument was, well, the workers want it because they can go from one farm to another farm to another farm. But to me, okay, if it's over 8 hours, somebody should be getting overtime for that over 8 hours.
So unless there's an objection from anyone, I'd like to say that we're directing Sarah in her legislative contacts and any of us that are out there to make clear that we don't support that.
I agree totally.
Okay, thank you. This one kind of pissed me off, so I'm glad we're all on the same page with it.
Well, it was very uncomfortable in the meeting to argue against most everybody else, but that's okay. Sometimes you gotta do that.
Well, thank you for doing that, Doug. Okay,
Well, and I guess I'd like to comment, you said, or Doug said, someone said that the people at the conference were opposed to it during harvest season, and that just seems really odd to me as a row crop, you know, knowing more about row crops. Harvest season is all the time.
right. Yeah, that's one of the many problems, and that's the WACD wording on their legislative priority list, is to get rid of the overtime pay requirement during harvest season. But yeah, what is harvest season? Or I think they might even use the term peak harvest, but what is peak harvest?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, well, thank you. I figured we would all be on the same page with that, so thanks.
Doug, did you get a sense that, I mean, would Thurston County be would Thurston Conservation District be the only one that would be speaking out against this? Or are there?
No, I suspect not, but it wasn't a formal discussion topic at WACD. I think we had sort of side conversations, and I definitely found some people that tried to convince me it was a good thing, and then others that were more aligned with us, like, no, let's keep paying these people what they deserve to get.
Yeah, and it seems, and this is maybe not sure how to say this politely. It seemed like it was aimed at Latinx people
Yes.
to me.
Well,
With
those are,
who? Aimed at who?
Latinx.
Oh,
I mean, those are the people that do the hardest work, generally speaking, in agriculture. So yes, I think just like we knew it was inherently racist when the policy was put in place in the 1930s, you know, not much has changed.
Well, to me, the basic argument is, why shouldn't people get paid overtime if they're overtime? If it's over 8 hours, they deserve the money.
Yeah, Helen.
Well, I mean, I guess this raises the question of process for how the legislative agenda is put together, because I mean, clearly there's a problem here with representation on the committee that puts together the legislative agenda. If something like that went forward without a lot of dialogue ahead of time. So I guess a question would be what does this tell us about how to think about suggesting some changes to the process for next year to make sure that there's good representation, for example, I assume there's kind of a legislative committee.
Well, basically, it's a board decision, a WACD board decision. That's where I got in the argument, and several other folks too. And it's kind of one of those things where, okay, 70%, or I don't know what the percentage is, 70% want to go this way and 30% want to go that way. So you go with the majority and screw the minority.
This would also be an opportunity, Helen, that if our district was really interested in bringing this topic to the floor for more discussion, that this could be a resolution that went forward, and then at least it would be a discussion that we could bring to our Southwest area and see where that went. May or may not have traction, but it might have traction in other areas and make it to the general meeting.
Good idea.
Okay.
They've had legislative committees in the past, but the committees seem to come and go.
Well, let's keep that in mind when it comes to resolution season next year. It might be a good step. Let's see, with that, I think we're done with legislative issues. Let's move on to final issues here on our work session. Updates and announcements. We'll start with the board and start with you, Betsy, if you have anything.
I do not.
Ellen?
Well, I kind of do, I guess, in regard to the TRPC. You know, I have tried to carry out my assignment of trying to get streams back on the agenda, and I'm getting nowhere with that, really. And it raises some questions for me about, I feel like the TRPC is getting farther and farther away from carrying out an environmental element, a water quality element as part of its annual activities. It's getting so focused on transportation. And, you know, there is a kind of I've talked to Mark Daly about how maybe we could bring water quality forward in discussing stormwater and things like that. And he agrees that stormwater is certainly going to become an increasingly important and increasingly funded element of transportation in the Puget Sound area. So we need to, I guess, think about that somehow. But I don't see a lot of traction in terms of trying to build on the RIA 13 stuff, because I don't really see a lot of traction for RIA 13. And then related to that, partly via TRPC, partly via recent decisions by the port on this Coca-Cola matter, and partly from my work around Grand Mound on the County Planning Commission, I'm growing increasingly concerned that Thurston County needs some kind of equivalent to an aquifer czar. I don't feel like there's any real consistent way of tracking what's happening to our county aquifers and the commitments that are increasingly being made for the water. And I'm noticing that there's a lot of planning to create new wells and things like that. And I'm not sure where that discussion needs to take place, but I feel like there needs to be a kind of a 10,000-foot view of what's happening and what the pressures are on the county's aquifers with development, and also making sure that the quality of the groundwater remains a priority, which is something that concerns me around the Grand Mound UGA stuff I've been working on. So I don't know, it's not really a report, but I guess it's kind of like, it's a thought that I've been having, and I'm not sure if there's a place for that with the conservation district, but somewhere somebody needs to take responsibility for looking at the county's aquifers as a whole and being a voice for their protection and for coordinated policy around them. Just thought.
A couple of quick reactions to what you said, Helen. First, on the issue of TRPC being too transportation focused. I sat on TRPC for a few years. I sat on the Transportation Policy Board, and I've been watching them, a long time. It comes and goes. And right now they're very transportation focused. I think because they have to do the new regional mobility plan, right? So they're driven by requirements for plans and where they're getting their funding. So I guess don't be too disheartened, because these are natural cycles that they have gone through over time. And I think it's important that we keep raising these issues as you're doing. And at some point the time will be right. And you're just priming the pump, and I think that's a good thing. And then the second issue is on the groundwater piece. Just wondering if you've talked with any of the advocacy organizations like the Sierra Club or League of Women Voters or any of the others, because that seems to me like the natural place to start a little community rabble rousing around that, more so than the district.
Right. Well, I know, there's, the league, I don't know what the status is really of their rolling out their research on, that they've been working on county water quality issues. And I could certainly look into that.
Okay, well, thank you for the update. Important stuff. Let's see, Doug, I think you're up next.
Okay, I had some comments on what Helen just said. TRPC, when I sat on it, it's just the same as what TJ said. It was emphasis on transportation and catch as catch can for environmental type stuff, and it kind of swings around over time. The other thing, and this is, I think, really, really important as far as funding goes, the Department of Ecology funded a groundwater management area for Thurston County, which did water quality characterizations for the groundwater, where the vulnerable areas were, who is in charge, what should be done, long-term projections, all that sort of stuff that kind of covers everything you mentioned. I used to run that program, not for Thurston, but people that worked for me did. So that was about 10, 15 years ago. So that's probably still in effect, I would guess.
So what was that? What was that titled?
Thurston County, Guama groundwater management area.
Okay.
That's when Tom Fitzsimmons was the director, and then Linda Hoffman. That era.
You have updates, Doug?
Yeah, I don't have anything to update that I can't do. I'll do it a little bit of NACD stuff when we get to the board meeting.
Okay. Couple things I'll report on. One is the City of Olympia adopted their budget last week, and that does include that money for us to do the urban agriculture work for the city. So that's good. We'll adopt our piece of that budget here in a little while tonight, and then we'll be able to move forward with that project and start pushing a little bit more on urban agriculture around here. And then we had a brief meeting with the Olympia Farmland Planning Group, just kind of a check-in meeting. And because the stuff is moving more into like some internal work at the city and now this contract work with us, we agreed we're not going to meet monthly anymore. We're going to meet, I think we said quarterly or every other month, I forget. So, and more kind of an information sharing and continuing to assess opportunities. But, the takeaway is that there's work going on as a result of that work group inside the city and outside. So, we've had some marginal success, which I'll try to remember when I watch them bulldoze the Spooner Farm property for soccer fields.
Oh, God.
The last thing I'll say is, Doug and I, Sarah, we attended the WACD annual meeting over in Wenatchee. And it was interesting. It was the first one I went to, and I think it was, there were pros and cons, but I would encourage, Helen and Betsy, think about going next year. I think it was worth being there. It was worth, more than anything, just getting a sense of where other conservation districts are coming from. so that when you see a legislative agenda that doesn't make any sense to you, you can see, oh, okay, now I understand because these districts are very different than we are over here. And, you know, it was also interesting that, you know, I mean, I feel still like after 4 years as a board member, I'm not by any, like, there are people that are getting like 30, 40, 49 years as board members. So I felt very new on the one hand, but on the other hand, there's people newer than me that were asking me questions too. So I thought that was really interesting. But yeah, consider going next year. It was worth going. I'll probably try to go again next year, more likely than not. And that's all I'll say about that. Okay.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Regarding the urban agriculture stuff with Olympia, would you all like me to contact NACD for one of their webinars for you, TJ and Sarah, to talk about the process we went through, what the challenges were, and how you got it into the budget and what the prognosis is for the future? They're usually about a half hour and they're pretty informal.
Yeah, that could be interesting. I think we could talk a little bit about what's happened here. I think it'll be more interesting maybe once we have some on the grounds work done. That I think, is it Nora that's going to be taking the point on a lot of that stuff? And you know, when we have some real success stories, maybe this time next year or something, I think that would be a really good opportunity too.
But yeah, could do both. Here's
Yeah.
what we said in early 2023, here in 2024, this is what happened.
Yeah, that sounds fine. If you want to put it out there, Doug, that sounds interesting to me.
Okay, well, it gives a little recognition to y'all, and I think that's a good thing.
All right. In our waning moments here of the work session, we'll do Sarah, ED report.
All right, I'll be fast. A couple of reminders first, and then I wanted to share a couple of things with you on the screen here. One thing, just a reminder, January 27th, 4 o'clock, Black Lake Grange is our winter hootenanny, hosted and coordinated by Marguerite and Nora. So, you know, there's going to be fun surprises included. You all were sent a potluck list. If you would like to participate in that event, you can sign up there. The other thing, January 18th and 19th is the next commission meeting / district tour, and it's close to us. It's in King CD. They're going to host. And for those that haven't been to one of those events yet, it circles around throughout the state, different districts host, and they offer a half-day tour the day prior to an all-day sort of business meeting for the
Really good.
commission.
Good.
Both are really great, right? Understanding what the commission does and seeing how some of their internal policy works is really interesting. You also have an opportunity for public comment there. The district tours, though, are super fun to get out on the ground and see project sites and see work of other districts, talk to their staff, talk to their board. They always do a dinner afterwards if you're interested. Both events, you know, are not necessarily linked, so you can do one or the other. Anyway, just great opportunity there. It's on the commission's website, and if you signed up for their listservs, they sent that out this afternoon. We were also funded through the Sustainable Farms and Fields program. We submitted a variety of applications. They were asking for mini applications in a bunch of different categories rather than one application that encompassed all the things we want to do. We got one of them funded so far. Their next ranking round and poll will be in January, so we'll know if we got other ones funded then. That was for a no-till drill, which has been something that has been discussed for many years, for decades at this district, as well as when we were stakeholders developing sustainable farms and fields. And no-till drill for Thurston CD was the thing. There is a survey out right now through January 3rd to producers in the community that would like to use this equipment. We're looking to just narrow down size and specifications and kind of ground truth what we've been hearing. That was something that, you know, the board was really interested in, is making sure that we had a survey out and some data to back up the equipment that we're purchasing for our equipment rental program. This is a particularly costly piece of equipment, and that makes a lot of sense. So that survey is out. We have been getting some responses. So far, a very middle of the row size drill seems to be of the highest priority. That's an 8-foot. The second highest priority is a larger drill than that for a larger landscape. So Definitely feel free to share that. You have a link to that in your inbox as well. If you need it again, let me know. I think I will probably pause there because we're right at 6, and I will send you some year-end updates. Yes, there's also stuff about training and other equipment in that survey. Where we stand on some of our year-end sort of TA progress. We continue to serve a lot of people and knock down that wait list. So I'll send that out via email.
Okay, thanks, Sarah.
I
Okay,
think
so
that's,
we're at 6 o'clock exactly, so well done, everybody. We'll take a break here, get some nourishment, say hi to our families or whatever, and then back at 6:30 for our board meeting. See you then.
I,
Okay, it's 6:30. Welcome everyone to the final board meeting of the year for Thurston Conservation District Board of Supervisors. January 22nd, or sorry, December 22nd, 20th. Start over, December 20th. Anyway, welcome everyone. For the record, with us this evening, we have board members Betsy DeBreda, Doug Rushton, and Helen Wheatley, myself, TJ Johnson, the chair. We have our legal counsel, Ben Cushman from Shoots Law Group. We have our executive director, Sarah Moorhead, and we have Jean Fite from the Washington State Conservation Commission. Welcome, everyone. We just finished a very productive work session here, and so now we're moving into our board meeting. First thing up is agenda review. Are there any changes to the agenda? And oh, Helen has one.
Yes. I would like to remove item A from the minutes.
Okay, we will take the minutes out of the consent agenda. We'll do them immediately after the minutes. That'll be our new item 4. With that, is there a motion to approve our agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Okay, I think I heard Betsy get there first. Do we have a second?
Second.
Helen seconded. Okay. Vote on our agenda. Betsy,
Aye.
Helen,
Aye.
Doug,
I,
and chair votes aye. We have an agenda. Next up is our consent agenda. We've removed the minutes. That leaves us 5 items on consent tonight: our monthly financial report, and then a bunch of different contracts that we will be approving here that we briefly took a look at the work session. So is there a motion on our consent agenda?
so moved.
Oh,
Okay.
I'll second.
Doug got in first with the motion, and Helen's the second. Vote on consent. Doug,
I,
Helen,
Aye.
Betsy,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. We have approved consent. We now move to item 4, which was the item we pulled off of consent. This is our meeting minutes from November 15th, 2022. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the work session minutes and board meeting minutes.
Okay, it's been moved by Betsy. Is there a second?
a second.
Seconded by Doug. Vote on the minutes here. Betsy,
Aye.
Doug,
I,
Helen,
Abstain.
and chair votes aye. So the minutes have passed with 3 yes votes and 1 abstention. I will also note for the record at this point, I should have said at the beginning that Supervisor David Ayala is not with us tonight. He got called out of town unexpectedly at the last minute, so he won't be with us tonight. Moving on then to partner reports. First up here is NRCS. I don't believe Rebecca's here with us tonight, but I see Sarah's hand.
Sorry, I scrolled down too far. We have public comment, but we don't have any members of the public here.
Thank you. Yeah, we scrolled over it, so I missed it. So we don't have any members of the public, but this would be the chance, if we did, for anyone to address the board for up to 3 minutes per person. But seeing no one here, I will open public comment and then immediately close public comment. Thanks, Sarah. We'll move back to partner reports then. We had NRCS, another hand with Sarah.
Yeah, an update on the first two partner reports. One is Rebecca Anderson has taken a new position within NRCS as the new statewide urban ag specialist. I'm not sure if that's the correct title, but she's going to be focusing on urban agriculture. She's going to be based still out of the Olympia office, which is great. We've already roped her into our City of Olympia urban ag farmland work, and have a meeting with her in January to talk about that, which is when she'll officially start that position. So we will potentially have a new face and name at some point in time for NRCS. And then Alina is not feeling well and won't be able to attend the meeting tonight for Department of Ecology. But she wanted to remind the board that there are 4 different chapters that they're looking at updating related to agriculture. And she sent that out and it was in the last newsletter. So that's her update for the night.
I have a couple questions or follow up on NRCS, Sarah. Is there a expected timeline for Rebecca's replacement?
No,
I knew
I
that
don't
was
know.
the answer, but I asked anyway.
I'm not even sure if they've begun recruitment for that position yet. So it could be quite some time. What will likely happen is that we will have another field office human sort of step in and sub. And when I know who that is, I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you. And then thing 2, the meeting with Rebecca about the Olympia farmland work, is that possible that I could get in on that meeting? And the reason being is I think it would be useful for her to understand kind of the bigger picture stuff of what we're dealing with working with cities on farmland preservation.
Absolutely. Nora, that meeting is between her and Nora, and I will make sure that you're included on that schedule.
Awesome, that'd be great, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, then that moves us on to next update. Jean, tell us all about the State Conservation.
Hey, there's so much. Yeah. So I think you probably heard Sarah Spaeth has stepped down from the commission, unfortunately. But we're very glad to be welcoming, is it Sherry Kearney? Am I saying that right? Does anyone know her? I know we've crossed paths years ago when I was in Oregon, and I only heard good things about her. She is also from a land trust background, so it's great to have that expertise still on the commission. And she'll be taking a seat, I believe, at the January meeting. So that's great news. Couple of things about funding for the current fiscal year. The announcement for the small food system grants is out. That's only a $5,000 limit. They're small, but I know y'all have done amazing things with that amount of money before. So looking forward to seeing that. The Sustainable Farms and Fields, of course, there's been a round already, another one coming up. Karen Hills is really getting her feet under her and coming up to speed. So that program, I'd say, is almost at full capacity now, just working out some of the rough spots here and there. There's a new hire coming on for riparian plant propagation program. And so I expect there'll be a similar pattern, right? Once there's some capacity there to put wheels under the program, it will start moving forward more rapidly, and I expect there'll be an RFP shortly after that person comes on board. Let's see, there's the governor's budget, right? Y'all have been looking through that document, I'm sure, and scratching your head like the rest of us. There's a lot to absorb. It's hard for my little brain to figure out how we could rise to that kind of opportunity without making some real changes. So I expect there'll be some real interesting conversations coming up. Now, who knows what's actually going to happen, right? This is the governor's budget. It's based on, cap and invest funds, a lot of uncertainty around that. Lots to find out when the sausage making gets underway, but not a bad opening position to be in going into session, it seems to me. So lots of folks sort of thinking about that and spinning ideas and this and that. So it's kind of an exciting time in that way. Those were the notes I had jotted down. Is there anything else folks were wondering about that I could answer? It's nice to see you. You know how to reach me if anything ever comes up, okay?
Thanks for the update. Thanks for joining us here from your snowy Mount Vernon perch.
Thanks.
Okay, then let's move on to WACD, NACD. Doug.
Okay, it's going to be short for WACD, and I'd like to remind you that February 8th is the Ledge Days. And we've already talked about that during the work session. So just a reminder, February 8th for WACD Ledge Days. On NACD level, I was on a call earlier today with their Natural Resources Policy Committee. NACD is undergoing some changes. They're going to go from about 7, what they call foundational committees, basic committees, to 3. And I think that'll be a good streamlining effort. And they're going to quit calling the subcommittees resource policy groups, RPGs, which to me says role-playing games. So they're going to do some changes there. And that'll be at the New Orleans meeting in February 11th through the 15th. But some of the things that I got from the meeting today, and they weren't real specific, but they talked about some congressional legislation. Apparently the NACD Executive Committee met with a bunch of agency leads and congressional staff and congressional people. And Stabenow from Michigan is the primary person on the ag stuff. And her main priority is defending the the Inflation Reduction Act conservation assessment is her main priority right now. And that's good news. The federal spending bill was released today. It's 5,000 pages. That's 5 with 3 zeros. I can't believe that hardly. Well, the feds, yeah. And NACD's quick analysis felt like it was pretty good. And the NRCS Conservation Operations Account, which is where the pass-through money comes from NRCS to the CDs, is about $900 million. That's a lot of zeros. And they've also talked about service providers self-certifying. So that's the technical service providers, the TSP people could self-certify that, yeah, I can do this, here's my credentials. So we'll see where that goes. And there's 18 billion in NRCS programs from the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. And NACD is submitting comments tomorrow on suggested changes that NRCS ought to do, like streamlining delivery, continuous signups, focus on system-based approach, basically look at the whole picture, things that will help local partners in conservation, like get stuff on the ground, and then more outreach, training, and certified planners. And that's the long and short of it for NACD.
Any questions, Doug?
I have a question. Should I go ahead?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Maybe I missed it. I only missed a couple minutes, but I called Doug or emailed him about this thing from Lincoln County, Lincoln Conservation District. And you know, he called back and left a message that that there was nothing found in the investigation or nothing substantiated, but they were still asking for a code of conduct to be moved forward, and I guess asking for support from us.
I didn't hear the asking for support part. Talking with some commission staff though, and Jean, you may want to jump in here with later information than I have. The information I had was that 2 or 3 of the commission members were going to talk to Lincoln CD.
Hey, Doug, I'm going to stop you there because we actually have an executive session scheduled later tonight to talk about this issue. And I think it's best discussed in executive session.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
That's good.
Thank you.
Reminder, Sarah. Okay. Any other questions for Doug on NACD, WACD? Okay. If not, then let's move to item 7. the 2023 TCD budget, which we have looked at now for a couple of months and looked at again at our work session today. And now it's time to take action on this thing. So is there a motion on our 2023 budget?
I move for adoption of the 2023 Thurston Conservation District budget.
Moved by Doug. Is there a second?
I second it.
Seconded by Betsy. So we will vote on the budget. Doug,
Aye.
Betsy,
Aye.
Ellen,
I,
chair votes aye. We have just approved the largest budget, I think, in the agency's history. Well done. All right. Me. Governance. Take a look at what's coming up in January at our work session and our meeting.
Oh, let me resume share. You can see that now.
Right, so it looks like a lot of the same stuff that we've talked about in the past. Back to staff presentations, which I, for one, am glad to have back again. Look forward to hearing about soil health program from Adam, which I know is just going gangbusters. Any comments, questions on this work session topic list?
Doug has his hand.
Yeah, Doug.
Yeah, I'd like to see at some point a staff presentation on the various NRCS programs. And I'm not talking about one from NRCS, I'm talking about one from our staff. I'm thinking about EQUIP, CRP, CREP. There's been so many changes over the years. I've kind of lost track of what that means. And basically what the basic function of the program is, how we use it here, and the results we've got. I'd like to see a presentation on that. And I should tell you, if I could retract a little bit or go back a little bit, I neglected on the WACD report to mention that all three resolutions that were passed at the WACD annual meeting were submitted yesterday at 7:30 p.m. to NACD. The Skagit one, which had three components, was broken into three parts. So there's actually 5 that we submitted. Anyway, sorry for the digression.
Does raise an issue, though. We do have WACD resolutions on this. Is that supposed to be there? Because we just seems like we just finished that cycle.
That's typo.
Okay,
Take it out.
take it out.
That's what reminded me. Thank you.
Takes a village. Okay. Okay, if there's no other comments on the work session, then let's take a look at the board meeting. Draft agenda. So probably the big item here is looking, providing some feedback. I'm thinking, and is that actually approving the annual plan, Sarah?
It's a placeholder, so I'm scrolling back up to the work session. I did add it here for
Got
a
it.
discussion topic. So depending on how much feedback the board has, we can certainly approve it at the February meeting, which is what we did this past year. And if there is not a lot of feedback, we could be prepared to approve it. It's up to the board.
And we aren't required to do anything with that until much later in the year, right?
That's correct. It's not due to the commission until May, so we have lots of time.
All right. It's always good to be overachievers, though.
Yeah.
Okay. Comments, questions on the agenda for next month?
I suggested an executive session, which would be a follow-up on the Lincoln stuff.
Okay, let's put it in as a placeholder pending on, what happens at tonight's executive session too.
Okay,
I
okay.
feel like we
so-
need that. Let's put it in as a placeholder. All right. With that then, I think we have done what we need to on this for now. We'll have more chances to make changes to it over the next month, but it's a good starting point. Get us back. There we go. So, and it's a perfect segue to a whole series of executive sessions we're having here this evening. So we have 4 executive sessions, I believe, scheduled tonight. First of which will be to discuss the performance of the executive director. That executive session is permitted under RCW 423110, as all of these are that we'll be talking about. The format for that executive session will be that the board and Sarah will meet together for a little bit, and then Sarah will leave, and the board will continue discussion and deliberation, and then we'll come back. I'll come back and report out on that executive session. We'll go back into an executive session to discuss possible real estate transactions. That will include all of the board and the executive director, and I'm assuming Ben Cushman, our legal counsel, as well. Come back out after that with another report, and then a third executive session on potential litigation with the board, the executive director, and our counsel. Report back, and then finally, a fourth executive session also on potential litigation, also including all board members, executive director, and our legal counsel. And then finally, we'll come back and report out from the fourth executive session, and we will adjourn for the evening. So that's where we're headed here. So first up, Sarah, if you can set up our breakout meeting room here, and board and ED will go into an executive session on ED performance for no more than 30 minutes. Thanks for being here, Gene. Bye-bye.
Bye, Gene.
So you're gonna be on my speaker, Doug, but
We just completed an executive session discussing the performance of our executive director. We will now be moving into another executive session. This is on the topic of real estate. And this executive session includes all board members, legal counsel, and executive director. And I think, check me if I'm, oh, there it is right there. We expect to spend no more than 10 minutes in this executive session, and we'll come back and report out after that. So take us back to the room, Sarah.
all right, stand by.
Okay, here we are back in public session. We just completed a short executive session of about 10 minutes on the topic of real estate, and of course took no decisions and just got an update from executive director and legal counsel. We will now go into our third executive session on the topic of potential litigation. I believe this is also a short 10-minute. No, this is longer. This is 20 minutes on the topic of potential litigation. And again, all board members, executive director, and legal counsel will be participating in this executive session. On, Sarah?
Now,
All right, we have just completed our third executive session on the topic of potential litigation. No decisions were made in that executive session. We provided direction and discussion to executive director. And with that, we have one more executive session scheduled to last 10 minutes. This is also on potential litigation. Will also include all board members, executive director, and legal counsel.
At least to start with, there might be a time for the executive director to step out briefly on this
Okay.
one, but we'll address that. So
Thank you, Ben. All right.
You're muted, TJ.
There we go. We just completed our fourth and final executive session on topic of potential litigation. We received information and provided direction to our executive director. No decisions were made. With that, we have come to the end of our board meeting. The last item on our agenda is to adjourn the meeting, and so we will need a motion to do that.
I so move.
Moved by Betsy,
Second.
seconded by Helen. The vote is on to whether to adjourn. Betsy,
Aye.
Helen,
Aye.
Doug,
Aye.
and chair votes aye. Our meeting is adjourned and complete, and our work is done for 2022. Good job, everybody.
Good
Not
job,
everybody,
guys.
yeah.